The day Emma Carter walked into Westbridge Motors began with the kind of soft, pale sunlight that made everything look a little more expensive than it really was. Boston's early autumn air carried just enough chill to make you zip your jacket halfway, but Emma hadn't bothered with one. She wasn't dressed for the showroom. That much was obvious to everyone who saw her step through the gleaming glass doors: white t-shirt, faded blue jeans, a pair of sneakers worn in all the right places from years of long walks and errands no one else wanted to run. Her hair was tied back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, no bag that screamed brand name. Inside, the dealership was a temple to excess. Light poured in from floor-to-ceiling windows, pooling over cars that looked like sculpture more than transportation. A Ferrari in candy apple red. A Bentley Continental in a muted champagne. A Lamborghini with doors that opened like wings, frozen mid-flight. Emma's gaze drifted to a raised platform near the center of the showroom, where a deep blue coupe seemed to float under a halo of white spotlights. Its lines were pure elegance, curves and edges balanced in a kind of effortless harmony. It wasn't flashy, but it had a presence. She took a step closer, admiring the shimmer in its paint as she moved. That's when the interruption came. "Can I help you?" The voice belonged to a man who looked like he'd been cut from a glossy brochure, Lucas Reeves, senior sales manager. His suit was a perfect charcoal, his shoes black leather polished to a mirror shine. He didn't smile. "Yes," Emma said, her tone even. "I wanted to ask about this model." She gestured toward the coupe. Lucas's eyes flicked from the car to her sneakers and back. "That one starts at $295,000, he said. The number hung in the air like a warning. "You might be more comfortable looking at our certified pre-owned section. Just across the street." Emma's hands stayed loose at her sides. "I'm interested in this one," she repeated. Lucas exhaled through a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, appointments are usually required for serious buyers. Especially for something in this range." Two younger staff members by the reception desk exchanged quick smirks. One tilted his head toward the door. Emma's gaze didn't waver. "Is it possible to see the interior?" Lucas glanced over his shoulder, and spotted a couple stepping inside. They were dressed head to toe in designer labels, the kind of customers who fit the silent checklist in his head. His entire energy shifted. "Excuse me," he said to Emma without looking at her. "Daniel can get you a brochure." And just like that, he was walking toward the new arrivals, his voice warming instantly. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. Welcome back." Daniel, barely mid-20s and swimming in a jacket 2 sizes too big, approached Emma with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry about that. Would you still like some details?" Emma nodded once. "Yes. Please." Daniel began explaining the specs, the handcrafted leather, the custom trim options, the limited production run. As he spoke, Emma's eyes wandered to where Lucas was now personally ushering Mrs. Harrington toward the coupe, pulling the door open with a flourish he hadn't offered her. "This model has a long reservation list," Lucas told the couple in a voice meant to impress. Mrs. Harrington ran her manicured hand over the dashboard. "It's stunning, but I'm not sure about the color." "We can talk customization," Lucas offered quickly. Emma stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, voice calm. "I was hoping to ask about purchasing this car." Lucas's smile faltered. "As I explained earlier, this is being viewed by another customer. Perhaps you could come back later. Or visit our pre-owned section. It's quite nice." "I'm specifically interested in this one," Emma said. "It's for my sister's birthday." Lucas's tone hardened. "Look, some folks like to dream big, but this isn't a fantasy lot. That car costs more than some people make in 5 years." A hush fell over the space. Customers had stopped browsing. Staff looked up from their desks. Emma's voice stayed level. "I'm prepared to purchase it today in full." Lucas laughed, loud enough for the sound to bounce off the glass. "A full payment? In cash? This isn't a flea market." He waved a hand at her outfit. "People who buy vehicles like this don't walk in wearing whatever that is." Emma's jaw tightened, but not from shame. She had heard worse before. She turned without another word, walking toward the glass doors as the laughter of a single person somewhere in the room followed her out into the sunlight. Outside, the bright mid-morning light felt sharper than it had when Emma arrived. She paused just beyond the dealership's glass doors, her reflection ghosted faintly in the window. Inside, Lucas had already turned his back to her. The Harringtons were laughing at something he'd said, oblivious to the quiet sting left in the air. Emma inhaled slowly, letting the cool breeze wash over her. She wasn't embarrassed, not exactly. What she felt was heavier, older, the familiar weight of being judged before being heard. She'd built a life around ignoring it, but that didn't mean it stopped hurting. She began walking down the sidewalk, her sneakers whispering over the concrete. With each step, the tension in her shoulders eased. The dealership was behind her now, its polished cars and glass facade shrinking with distance. To a stranger passing her on the street, Emma looked like anyone else, a woman heading somewhere with no particular rush. But inside, her thoughts were precise. She didn't get angry easily, but when she did, her mind sharpened like glass. Emma Carter was not poor. She wasn't even comfortably well off in the usual sense. She was the co-founder and driving force behind Carter Bridge, a foundation that funded housing, therapy, and adaptive sports programs for children with severe disabilities. The foundation's reach stretched across states, and over the past decade, she had personally overseen programs that impacted thousands of families. She dressed simply because it kept her grounded. In her world, the focus belonged on the kids, not on the person signing the checks. But that simplicity had been her camouflage too, the kind that let her walk into a children's hospital without creating a spectacle, the kind that let her talk to parents without a wall of perceived wealth between them. And now, it had been the reason Lucas Reeves saw her as nothing more than a time waster. When she reached the corner, Emma stopped. She pulled her phone from her pocket and stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the screen. The temptation to call her husband immediately was there, but she didn't like to bring problems to him without first considering the outcome she wanted. Thomas Carter was not the kind of man to explode in anger, but he had an unshakable presence that could fill a room without raising his voice. When Thomas acted, people remembered. That's why Emma always made sure the cause was worth his time. This was worth it. Not because she wanted revenge, but because Lucas, and people like him, needed to learn a lesson that would stick. She decided to tell him later that evening, face to face. For now, she tucked the phone away and kept walking, the city unfolding around her in a slow rhythm of traffic hum and distant conversation. That evening, the Carter estate glowed softly in the fading light. The property wasn't ostentatious in the way outsiders might expect from its size. The architecture was sleek, minimalist, with clean lines and an intentional absence of ornament. Thomas believed true wealth didn't need to shout. Emma stepped into his study without knocking. He looked up from his desk, where blueprints for a renewable energy project were spread out in careful rows. "You're home earlier than I thought," he said, leaning back in his chair. His eyes scanned her face, reading the subtle cues no one else would catch. Something happened. Emma sat opposite him, legs crossed, hands resting loosely in her lap. "I went to Westbridge Motors today." "For the coupe?" Thomas asked. "For the coupe," she confirmed. He waited, sensing there was more. "I never got as far as sitting in it," she said. "The senior sales manager decided I wasn't suitable for their high-end section. Suggested I might be more comfortable in the pre-owned lot." Thomas's jaw flexed, but he stayed silent. "He made it clear he didn't believe I could afford it," Emma continued. "In front of customers. In front of his own staff." "Did anyone step in?" "One. A young salesman named Daniel, no, Jason, tried to help. The rest? They either ignored it or smirked along with him." Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "Do you want me to go there?" Emma met his gaze. Not to make a scene, but maybe to make a point. He nodded slowly, the beginnings of a plan forming in his mind. "We'll do it in the morning. My way." Emma's lips curved just slightly. She trusted Thomas's way. It was rarely loud, but it was always remembered. As she rose to leave the room, he called after her. "Emma." She paused in the doorway. "That coupe," he said, "is going to your sister. Exactly as you intended." The following morning began in that crisp, pale way autumn mornings often do in New England, the kind where the air feels cleaner, like the day is daring you to make something of it. At the Carter estate, sunlight spilled through tall glass panels, striking the polished oak floors in Thomas's study. He was already awake, dressed in an open-collared white shirt and slate trousers, reviewing documents on his tablet when Emma stepped in, coffee in hand. "You're up early," she said. "I couldn't sleep," he replied, setting the tablet down. "I've been thinking about yesterday." Emma handed him the coffee. "I told you, I don't want drama. But I also don't want that man treating anyone else the way he treated me." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "I understand. Which is why we're going to make this a lesson he remembers for a long time, without shouting, without threats." Go on. Emma's tone carried a hint of curiosity. We'll start by showing them exactly who they dismissed, Thomas said. I'll arrive at Westbridge Motors this morning. In the Phantom. Emma arched an eyebrow. That's a little more dramatic than you usually like. Not if I do it quietly, he countered. The car will get their attention, but what I say will hold it. I'll ask for Lucas Reeves by name. Then I'll remind him that his judgment yesterday cost him a sale, and almost cost his dealership something much bigger. Emma tilted her head. Which is? The corporate fleet purchase, Thomas said. 7 vehicles. And possibly some additions to my private collection. Her lips curved. You've been holding out on me. It's called leverage, he said simply. And I plan to use it, but with conditions. Emma took a seat across from him. Such as? He'll volunteer at the Carter Bridge Benefit Gala next month, Thomas said. Not as a guest. As a worker. Moving tables, assisting guests, interacting with the families we serve. If he can't understand the value of humility, he can at least experience it firsthand. Emma nodded slowly. I like it. And the dealership? Unconscious bias training for every employee, Thomas replied. I'll offer to connect them with facilitators I trust. If the owner refuses, we take our business elsewhere. Emma sipped her coffee, the steam curling between them. It's a good plan. Just don't humiliate him. That's not what this is about. Thomas smiled faintly. It's never been about humiliation. It's about perspective. 2 hours later, the Carter estate's driveway hummed with life. The Rolls-Royce Phantom, its deep blue paint shifting toward violet in the sunlight, sat ready at the base of the front steps. The chauffeur, Marcus, adjusted his gloves before opening the rear passenger door. You're sure you want to go alone, sir? Marcus asked. Thomas stepped inside the car. Yes. This isn't about making a scene. It's about making a point. Emma will hear all about it tonight. The Phantom glided down the long private drive, through the wrought iron gates, and onto the quiet suburban road. Inside, Thomas reviewed his mental script. He wouldn't need many words. Just the right ones, delivered with the kind of measured calm that carried more weight than volume ever could. By the time the car merged into city traffic, he could already picture the scene at Westbridge Motors, heads turning as the Phantom rolled into view, staff rushing to open doors, the subtle but unmistakable shift in how they treated a man they thought they understood at first glance. Thomas didn't care about their attention. He cared about what would happen after. Back at the estate, Emma stood in the upstairs balcony, watching the Phantom disappear beyond the trees. She trusted Thomas's approach. He had a way of holding a mirror to people without them realizing it until much later. Still, she wondered what Lucas Reeves's expression would look like when he heard her name. She smiled to herself. Whatever it was, it would be worth the wait. The morning rush in Boston had thinned to a steady hum by the time the Rolls-Royce Phantom turned off the main road and glided into Westbridge Motors' entrance. The dealership's glass facade reflected the deep blue sheen of the car like water catching the sky. Inside, Lucas Reeves was mid-sentence in a staff meeting, gesturing toward the showroom floor. Remember, vet your customers. Don't waste time on window shoppers. He didn't notice the Phantom until one of the junior salesmen, Jason, shifted toward the window. Whoa. Is that? Lucas turned, his voice trailing off. The Phantom was unlike anything they usually saw outside a trade show. Its lines were precise yet fluid, its finish so deep it seemed to absorb the light and throw it back in soft gradients of blue and violet. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out, walked to the rear door, and opened it with practiced grace. A tall man emerged, poised, unhurried, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His presence was not loud, but it was impossible to ignore. Lucas straightened his tie and moved quickly toward the entrance. "Good morning, sir," he said, slipping on his most polished smile. "Welcome to Westbridge Motors. Lucas Reeves, Senior Sales Manager. How may I assist you?" The man extended his hand briefly. "Thomas Carter. I'm here to see the midnight blue coupe you have on display." Lucas's grin widened. "Excellent choice, Mr. Carter. One of the finest models we've carried. Extremely limited production. Allow me to personally—" "I know exactly where it is," Thomas interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "My wife was here yesterday asking about it." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, confusion, a faint tightening of the jaw. "Your wife?" "Emma Carter," Thomas said evenly. "She came in wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and sneakers." The recognition hit like a stone dropped into still water. Lucas's confident posture faltered. Ah. Yes, I may have spoken with her. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding. There wasn't, a voice cut in from behind them. Jason, standing near the reception desk, spoke carefully but clearly. She asked to see the coupe. You redirected her to the pre-owned lot. The air in the showroom shifted. Conversation stopped. Thomas turned slightly toward the young salesman. Thank you for your honesty. Then, to Lucas, yesterday, my wife came here to purchase the coupe as a gift for her sister. She was prepared to pay in full. Instead, she was treated as though she didn't belong. Lucas's voice was tight. Mr. Carter, I assure you, that's not how we. Spare me the assurances, Thomas said, still calm. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because this experience nearly cost your dealership more than one sale. The dealership's general manager, Richard Hale, had been watching from his office. Now he stepped forward, his face pale. Mr. Carter, I overheard part of what happened yesterday. If I'd realized the full context. The context, Thomas said, is that your staff judged a customer's worth by what she wore. My business was prepared to acquire this coupe, plus a fleet of 7 vehicles for our company expansion. That decision is now under review. A murmur rippled through the staff gathered nearby. Richard swallowed. Please, allow us the chance to make this right. There may be a way, Thomas said. It will require more than a handshake and a discount. I'm listening, Richard replied quickly. Thomas's gaze returned to Lucas. You'll volunteer at the Carter Bridge Benefit Gala next month. Not as a guest. As staff. You'll help with seating, serving, guiding families. You'll see exactly the kind of people my wife works for, and why respect isn't optional. Lucas opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally nodded. Yes, sir. Thomas turned back to Richard. And your entire staff will complete unconscious bias training within the quarter. I can recommend facilitators who are exceptional at their work. Richard nodded without hesitation. Consider it done. Good, Thomas said. Then, softening slightly, he glanced toward Jason. I'd like you to handle the coupe purchase, just as my wife intended. Jason blinked. Me? Sir, thank you. I'd be honored. Thomas gave a short nod, then walked toward the raised platform where the coupe waited under the lights. He ran his hand along its flawless curve. My wife has excellent taste, he said quietly. Behind him, Lucas stood frozen, the showroom's chatter slowly returning. But it wasn't the same chatter as before, there was a new undercurrent to it. A shift. The coupe gleamed under its halo of spotlights, a masterpiece of design and engineering. Thomas let his hand rest on the smooth curve of the hood for a moment before turning back toward the dealership's 2 most senior figures, Richard Hale and Lucas Reeves. I'm not a man who enjoys making demands, Thomas began, his voice measured, but I've learned that certain lessons only sink in when they're tied to something tangible. Yesterday, my wife walked out of this building without the respect she deserved. Today, I walked in with the decision to either invest here or take my business elsewhere. Richard nodded quickly, the lines on his forehead deepening. Mr. Carter, I understand. This is not who we are as a company. We will do whatever it takes to show you that. Good, Thomas said. Because I don't want a free car. I don't want discounts, or some grand public apology. What I want is for you, all of you, to change how you see people. A few salespeople, standing in the background, shifted uncomfortably. Lucas, Thomas continued, you'll be at the Carter Bridge Benefit Gala next month. You'll volunteer for the full day, setting up, assisting guests, supporting the children. You'll see firsthand the communities my wife serves. No luxury cars. No tailored suits. Just people, some fighting for their lives, others fighting to make those lives better. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he gave a short nod. Understood, sir. This isn't punishment, Thomas added. It's perspective. What you take from it will be up to you. He turned back to Richard. Your entire staff will attend unconscious bias training before the end of the quarter. If your dealership truly values every customer, you'll ensure that value is visible in every interaction, not just with the ones who walk in looking like they can write a check. Richard agreed instantly. We'll start scheduling sessions today. Excellent, Thomas said. Then his expression softened, and he glanced toward Jason. The coupe purchase will be handled by Jason here, the only one yesterday who treated my wife with basic courtesy. Jason's eyes widened slightly. Thank you, sir. I'll make sure every detail is perfect." Thomas gave him a small, approving nod. "I trust you will." The conversation might have ended there, but Thomas wasn't quite done. "One more thing," he said, his voice carrying just enough weight to pull the room's attention back to him. "That fleet purchase I mentioned? 7 vehicles for our company expansion, possibly more for my personal garage, is still on the table. But I'm not ready to sign anything today." Richard hesitated. "What would convince you?" "Follow through," Thomas replied simply. "If I see real change, if I hear from my wife that she can walk into this dealership in jeans and sneakers and be treated with the same respect as any other client, then we'll do business. Until then, consider it pending." Lucas's eyes dropped to the floor. Jason looked determined. Richard looked like a man suddenly aware of just how much was at stake. Thomas glanced toward the glass entrance. The Phantom was waiting outside, its paint catching the sunlight in shifting shades of deep ocean blue. "Jason," he said, "send me the final paperwork for the coupe by this evening. I want my wife's sister to have it in time for her birthday." "Yes, sir," Jason said quickly. With that, Thomas started toward the door. Staff members stepped aside as he passed, some with expressions of curiosity, others with the kind of guarded respect that comes when someone forces you to rethink your assumptions. Lucas remained still, the weight of the moment settling around him like an invisible cloak. As Thomas reached the exit, he stopped and looked back. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "I'll see you at the gala. Wear comfortable shoes. You'll be on your feet a lot." A few of the junior staff exchanged glances, biting back smiles. Lucas simply nodded once, his voice quiet. "Understood." Then Thomas stepped into the crisp air, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. Marcus, the chauffeur, was already at the ready, opening the Phantom's rear door. As the car pulled away, Thomas allowed himself the faintest smile. It wasn't about winning. It was about planting a seed, one he hoped would grow into something bigger than a single sale. Inside Westbridge Motors, the quiet buzz of conversation resumed. But something had shifted. The ballroom at the Grand Bay Hotel didn't look like a ballroom anymore. Overnight, it had been transformed into a living, breathing celebration. Banners in soft blues and silvers drifted from the rafters, tables were draped in white and trimmed with tiny tea lights, and an archway of photos told stories in still frames. Children learning to walk with braces, teenagers hitting jump shots from sport wheelchairs, parents smiling with the kind of relief you only see when help finally arrives. At 8 a.m., before the donors and the cameras and the curated speeches, a box truck huddled by the service entrance. Lucas Reeves stood there in a volunteer t-shirt 2 sizes too big, a lanyard that read Carter Bridge, staff, and sneakers that had never seen this many miles in a single day. A man with 4 arms like tree trunks hopped off the truck and slapped a clipboard into Lucas's hands. "You're Lucas? Great. I'm Dev. We're staging registration tables on the east side, silent auction to the west. We need everything offloaded in 1 hour. You good with a dolly?" Lucas blinked. Dolly?" Dev grinned. "You're gonna be by the end of the day." They moved. Cases of folding chairs. Boxes of printed programs. Crates of adaptive sports equipment, strange-looking basketballs with extra grip, sleek helmets, a mini-ramp. Lucas tried to lift a crate solo, grunted, and nearly lost it. Dev caught the edge with one hand and nodded toward his posture. "Bend your knees, not your pride," he said. "We've got a lot to do." By 9:15, sweat had darkened the back of Lucas's shirt. He'd rolled tablecloths, taped signage, learned 3 knots, and discovered that gaffer tape is mankind's closest cousin to a miracle. Volunteers swirled around him, teachers, nurses, teenagers in matching shirts, retirees with the cheerful stamina of people who know the value of showing up. Em arrived just before 10, moving through the service corridor with a clipboard and a comm that organized chaos. She wore a simple navy dress and flats. No jewelry beyond her wedding band, nothing to suggest she could buy the hotel if she wanted to. She paused at the archway of photos, adjusted one frame by a fraction, and looked up. Her eyes found Lucas. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I'm here to work," he replied, voice steadier than he felt. "You already are." She glanced at the pallets he and Dev had just finished. "We're flipping the small ballroom into an activity zone after lunch, adaptive hoops, art station, quiet room in the back for sensory breaks. Can you lead the setup for the hoops?" "I can learn," Lucas said. "That's all we ever ask." Emma's mouth tipped into the smallest smile. Dev will show you the rigging." They turned toward the small ballroom, and that's where Lucas met Thomas again, but this time, without a suit between them. Thomas was on the floor with a measuring tape, laying out lines for wheelchair lanes. He looked up, nodded once to Lucas, and returned to the tape. No grand speech. No reminder. Just work. By noon, the donor reception had started. Musicians sent a warm hush through the main hall, and the lights dimmed to a flattering ember. In the small ballroom, volunteers ran drills. Lucas crouched at the freestanding hoop, adjusting the counterweight, sweat beading along his temple. A boy rolled up in a sport chair, small, fierce, a constellation of freckles across his nose. "Is it ready?" he asked, palms on the wheels like a sprinter in starting blocks. "Almost," Lucas said, tugging the last strap into place. "What's your name?" "Cal," the boy said. "I'm 8. I have brittle bone disease. But my shots are still wet." Lucas smiled despite himself. "Show me." Cal took the ball, spun once to position, and launched a smooth arc that kissed the backboard and fell home. He pumped his fist, then turned a solemn look on Lucas. "That was regulation distance. You can move the tape back now." "Yes, sir," Lucas said, masking a laugh. Another child rolled up. Then another. Parents lingered at the edges, some exhausted in quiet ways, some brimming with a hope that felt fragile and tough at once. Lucas fetched balls, retrieved rebounds, adjusted straps, and learned to move around chairs the way you move around dancers, anticipating, giving space, reading the rhythm. At one point, he knelt to tie a loose shoelace for a girl whose hands shook too much to manage the knot. She looked down at him with large, serious eyes. "Are you a coach?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "Just a helper today." "Helpers are good," she said, as if granting absolution. By mid-afternoon, the small ballroom had become a world of its own, laughter bouncing against the walls, the squeak of wheels on polished floors, the thud-thud of basketballs sinking into a communal heartbeat. Lucas barely noticed his phone buzzing in his pocket. He barely noticed the ache in his shoulders. What he did notice were the moments: a father wiping his face after his daughter completed 2 passes without assistance, a mother teaching a volunteer how to angle a chair before a free throw, Dev quietly swapping a heavier ball for a lighter one without making a child feel weak, Emma crouched at eye level with a teenager who'd withdrawn to the quiet room, speaking in a voice that said "I see you, not hurry up." Sometime after 3, during a lull, Emma came to stand beside Lucas at the edge of the court. They watched Cal sink another jumper and celebrate with a controlled spin. "Do you always volunteer like this?" Lucas asked, eyes still on the kids. "Every chance I get," she said. "The office work keeps the lights on. This keeps the Y alive." Lucas swallowed. "I was wrong," he said. "About you. About a lot of things." Emma didn't rescue him from the admission. She let the quiet hold. He went on. "I thought my job was to filter. To save time by reading the room fast. But I wasn't reading. I was judging. And once I decided, I stopped seeing the person standing in front of me." She turned to look at him. "What will you do with that?" "I'll rebuild how we greet people," he said after a beat. "No more silent checklists. No more profiling. If you walk in, you're welcome. Period." Emma nodded. "Good. And when you slip, because people do, you correct it in the open. Not with excuses. With accountability." He took a breath. "I can do that." "Then we're fine," she said. "The rest is practice." The evening program unfolded in a glow of speeches that were more gratitude than performance. A mother told the story of the first time her son heard the ocean through a cochlear device the foundation had funded. A teen rolled onto the stage flanked by teammates and said, "You didn't give me a miracle. You gave me a place to work for mine." Thomas spoke briefly, facts, numbers, the road ahead, and then stepped aside to let the families be the heroes of their own narrative. He found Emma near the wings afterward, touched her elbow, and nodded toward the small ballroom. "Come see this," he said. They slipped in to find Lucas still at his post, tallying equipment, thanking volunteers, kneeling to talk to Cal about a clinic schedule. No cameras. No handshakes to collect. Just the work. Thomas watched for a moment, then spoke quietly. "He's different." "He's beginning," Emma said. "That's enough for today." Later, as the last tea light guttered and the archway of photos came down, Lucas was in the service hall stacking chairs beside Dev. He wiped his forearm across his brow and let out a breath that felt like it had been in his lungs for years. Dev nudged him with an elbow. "Tomorrow you're gonna feel muscles you didn't know you had." "Today I felt people I didn't know I'd stopped seeing," Lucas said, surprising himself. Dev nodded once, the kind of nod men give when words aren't the point. "Then you did it right." As Lucas turned to wheel the last cart toward the truck, he saw Emma at the far end of the corridor, speaking softly with the mother and her daughter. She glanced up, met his eyes, and raised a hand in thanks that didn't need language. He returned the gesture, small, honest, enough. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. The city shimmered. Somewhere across town, in a garage that smelled faintly of new leather and possibility, a deep blue coupe waited for a ribbon and a birthday. Inside Lucas's chest, something weighty shifted, not guilt, exactly, and not pride. More like space. The kind you make when you set down what you no longer need to carry. He exhaled, closed the truck's latch, and let the quiet say the rest. 3 weeks after the gala, the winter light in Boston had shifted, brighter in the mornings, sharper in the afternoons, with that crisp edge that hinted snow wasn't far off. Westbridge Motors looked the same from the street, same pristine glass, same glossy cars parked in perfect diagonals. But inside, the mood felt subtly different. Jason was at the reception desk, chatting with a young couple who were clearly just browsing. No pressure. No sales pitch. He listened first, spoke second. In the corner, a training binder labeled Unconscious Bias, Staff Development lay open, its pages highlighted in several colors. Lucas Reeves came out of his office in a navy suit that was noticeably simpler than his usual choices. The tie was plain. The shoes were still polished, but not mirror shiny. He carried a folder under his arm and a look that suggested he was thinking about something more than numbers. The glass doors parted, and in walked Thomas and Emma Carter. No Phantom today. No chauffeur. Just the two of them, side by side, dressed like a couple out for a casual afternoon. Emma wore her usual jeans, white shirt, and sneakers. Thomas wore an open sweater over a collared shirt. Jason spotted them first. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, welcome back." Emma smiled. "Hi, Jason. Is Lucas here?" Jason nodded and turned toward his manager. Lucas stepped forward, his expression open but cautious. "Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter. Good to see you both." Emma steadied him for a moment. "I hear you've been busy." Lucas gave a small, almost self-deprecating smile. "I have. The gala was different from anything I've done. In a good way. I've kept volunteering on weekends." Thomas nodded once. "That's good to hear." Lucas glanced at Jason, then back to Thomas. "I also owe you a proper thank you. Not for the second chance with the gala. For letting me see what I'd been missing. I'm working with the team to change how we greet customers, no more silent checklists. If you walk in here, you're welcome. Period." Emma's eyes softened slightly. "That's a good start." Thomas shifted the folder under his arm and handed it to Lucas. "This is the finalized order for the corporate fleet. 7 vehicles. And a note about 2 more for my private collection, if you're still willing to handle it." Lucas blinked. "Me?" "Yes," Thomas said. "Jason will assist, but I want you to oversee it. Think of it as a trust you earn with every decision from here on." Lucas opened the folder, scanned the details, and exhaled. "I won't waste it." "I know," Thomas said. While Jason began pulling up the coupe's delivery status, Emma wandered toward the raised platform where it had first caught her eye. It looked just as it had weeks ago, except now she could see past the paint and the price tag. She saw the moment her sister would see it, the surprise, the joy. Lucas joined her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "It's ready for delivery tomorrow. We can have it transported directly to your sister's home, or—" Emma shook her head. "I'll take it to her myself." Lucas smiled faintly. "Good choice." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw a man who still carried his ambition, but also a new awareness. Maybe it was still fragile, but it was there. "You know," she said quietly, "most people don't get the chance to see how their actions affect others in real time. You got that chance. Don't waste it." "I won't," Lucas said. "I can't change how I treated you, but I can change how I treat the next person who walks through that door." Emma gave a single nod, then turned back to the coupe. By the time the Carters stepped back out into the crisp afternoon air, the dealership felt different. Not because of the cars or the lighting, but because they'd left something behind, a seed, the same kind Thomas had planted the day he arrived in the Phantom. Inside, Lucas stood at the large window, watching them cross the lot together. Jason joined him, holding a printed invoice. "You know," Jason said, "a month ago, I don't think they would have come back." Lucas kept his eyes on the couple. "A month ago, I don't think I would have deserved it." Jason gave a small smile. "So, lunch? We've got that new cafe down the street." "In a bit," Lucas said. "First, I want to make sure Mrs. Patel over there has someone helping her with the stroller. She's been looking at the SUVs." Jason nodded and peeled away. Lucas stepped out from behind the glass and into the showroom, his stride purposeful but no longer predatory. For the first time in a long while, the job wasn't just about closing deals. It was about opening doors, and making sure everyone who walked through them felt they belonged.